For a minute, put yourself in 2003. Superman Ultimate Flight just opened at Six Flags Great Adventure, but more importantly, Top Thrill Dragster opened at Cedar Point. This opened as the world's tallest and fastest roller coaster, bringing the ongoing coaster wars to heights it had never seen before. Six Flags was on a spending spree during this era, being owned by Premier Parks. Six Flags Great Adventure in particular was receiving a lot of new capital, as in addition to Superman, the park also opened Nitro in 2001. Behind the scenes, park officials were getting ready for their next massive addition, this one bigger than anything the park had done yet. Plans began for this brand new addition, and the park was given a choice. They had to choose between a 450-foot tall Strata Coaster, a ride that would take the title for the world's tallest and fastest coaster away from Cedar Point's Top Thrill Dragster, or they could pick a massive Giga Coaster, similar in design to Superman Ride of Steel's Six Flags New England, but supersized. As we know, they wound up going with the Strata Coaster that later became Kingda Ka, but what if they didn't? In today's edition of What If, we will look at what if Kingda Ka was instead a massive Giga Coaster inspired by a ride with one of the best layouts of any coaster out there. Looking at what could have been for this massive attraction, first we're going to look at what the layout / scale of this attraction probably would have been. So my best guess is it definitely would be in the same spot as where Kingda Ka currently is, but I think it probably would have taken up more of the parking lot. A Giga Coaster has a much larger footprint than something like Kingda Ka does. I'm not saying Kingda Ka is small, but that's just a straight line out and back. A Giga Coaster has a much more dynamic layout, and if they did go for something similar to Superman the Ride, it would be out and back. I don't think that would work too well there. They'd probably need a little more space, so there'd probably be a turn somewhere in the layout. I would also assume that they probably would have gone for the world's tallest Giga Coaster, and at that time the current tallest was Steel Dragon 2000 at 318 feet, so I think we definitely could have seen them go 320, maybe even 330. For all we know, it could have still been the tallest Giga Coaster, even compared to Fury 325. But I think this coaster would have been absolutely massive for starters, and I think the parking lot, there would definitely be a larger portion of the parking lot taken up. I'd imagine they probably would have had the ride start a little closer to the boardwalk. The station would be back there. That way they could have more room for the lift hill, drop, and first few elements. When actually mapping it out, Millennium Force from station to the end of its first drop is around 700 feet. Meanwhile, Kingda Ka in its current form takes up about 1,200 feet straight across. So they definitely would have been able to fit the lift hill and drop, no problem. They probably could have even squeezed in an airtime hill in that same footprint that Kingda Ka follows. From there though, they would have to change up the layout a little bit, whether they went right into an overbank turn to bring the ride back the way Superman the Ride does, or if they did something else. I'd imagine they probably would have gone closer to the road of the entrance and maybe done some kind of a turning element through there, just to kind of use up more of that space. They could have gone over that little parking lot that's there and reconfigured it no problem, brought it back around. They probably would not be able to go through the safari because they don't want to disturb the animals, but they could ride up alongside it. I could even see it maybe going back towards Medusa, coming back around. And another point that we're going to talk about in a little bit is El Toro. El Toro definitely would have been complicated by this ride's existence because I think they probably would have just gone ahead and removed Viper when building this attraction. Viper was already a very problematic ride. It was a prototype, and it would just wind up being removed a couple years later anyways in preparation for El Toro being built. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they ripped out Viper for this attraction. It would have made a lot of sense. It would have given them more space to use for the Giga Coaster layout. But overall, I think this ride would have been absolutely spectacular layout-wise. Again, they're basing it off of a ride like Superman at Six Flags New England, which has such a great layout. It has a very strong first half with these big, powerful elements, and then goes into a twister type second half, which is really great. I think as long as it was a little more of a dynamic layout than Millennium Force has, they would have had an absolute winner on their hands. And at this point in Intamin's existence, they were doing some great stuff. They had tons of great coasters coming out. I'd imagine this ride would have had lap bars similar to that of Millennium Force with the T-bar restraints, so it probably wouldn't have been as whippy per se as Intimidator 305 is with those really fast-paced maneuvers. I do think it would have had a ton of airtime and positive G-forces, which in my opinion would easily make this the best coaster at the park at that time. When comparing it to a ride like El Toro, that does kind of complicate things a little bit. Of course, El Toro may not have even been able to be built due to this attraction. Like I said, it would probably have to run through Viper's plot just to make it work back there. They would also have to work around Rolling Thunder because I doubt they would have removed Rolling Thunder that early on. There's still plenty of room around it, but El Toro probably wasn't in their thoughts when designing this layout, so El Toro may not have been able to be built there. They might have had to move it to a different area of the park or cancel the project entirely, which I know a lot of people would not be happy about, but if that means we get a giant Giga Coaster better than El Toro, I think that would be worth it. Speculating on the theming / area of the attraction is definitely a little difficult. I'd imagine they probably would have kept it named Kingda Ka because it would be by far the tallest and fastest coaster at the park, probably the longest coaster at the park too, if they went for a really long Giga Coaster type layout. I think that this would have been a great way to segue from everything else around it into that area. I'd imagine they'd still do Golden Kingdom. I don't know if they would do Balin's Jungle Land, but then again, this would probably cost around the same amount of money as Kingda Ka did because Kingda Ka is not a cheap attraction at all, so money probably wouldn't be an issue there. Balin's Jungle Land could have opened but maybe had a slightly different layout. And like I said, I don't think Viper would have made it. I think they might have had to use some of that land, but for all we know, they definitely could have worked around it, which of course leads to El Toro, which would open the year after, of course, after Kingda Ka. But with this edition, I'd imagine it would still open in 2005, and then El Toro, like I said, I'm not 100% sure if they would have been able to cram it in, just assuming that the Giga Coaster wouldn't take up where El Toro currently runs. Let's say it was able to be built without any modifications made. That would probably be the two greatest coasters ever made right next to each other. There would be no other 1-2 punch that would be able to compare to a massive Giga Coaster like that of what this would be, Kingda Ka, and El Toro, which is probably the world's best wooden coaster, especially at the time of being built. I think in terms of longevity, this probably would have been the better route to go down than the Strata Coaster. I think Kingda Ka, of course, is a great attraction, but it definitely does suffer from downtime. It's extremely expensive to maintain. A ride like this, depending on the route they went down, they probably would have had a cable lift, which does have problems of its own, but overall, the coaster would be relatively simple, just really big, and I think it would definitely be much more reliable than what we wound up getting, and I think that the public would be more willing to ride it. Of course, Kingda Ka is still a very popular attraction, but I think if they saw a coaster like this that isn't necessarily as tall or fast as Kingda Ka, but still has that presence, I think it would definitely excite them. So overall, I do think that had they gone with the Giga Coaster, in the end, it would have been a better move than going for Kingda Ka. I do understand why they went for the Strata Coaster. They wanted to grab that record, be able to say they have the tallest and fastest coaster in the world. And that record, at least the height record, still stands to this day until Falcon's Flight opens. So it was a pretty good move back then, long term of course, but I do still think that it would have been great to see a giant Giga Coaster on this plot of land. There's so much room for it, so much possibilities with what that layout could have brought, especially if it was inspired off of Superman the Ride. That would have been absolutely unbelievable. But with that being said, that is it for this edition of What If, being what if Kingda Ka was a Giga Coaster instead of a Strata Coaster, with a layout inspired by Superman Ride of Steel at Six Flags New England. I want to know what you guys think about this what if. This could have happened, so it's not something that I'm just pulling out of nowhere. It was in talks and almost did happen, so if you guys were in park management back then, would you have picked the Giga Coaster or would you have kept the Strata Coaster? Let me know down in the comments. If you guys enjoyed this first edition of What If, please let me know down in the comments which other ones you'd like to see me cover. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos coming soon to Hollywood Studios. Goodbye, guys.